Hello, welcome to the King Connection podcast. I'm your host King, and I'm joined by my guest. I'm sorry today, Robert French, who's a crime author and very interesting gentleman. I'm looking forward to talk to today. So, welcome to the King Connection podcast, Robert. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you, King. I'm really happy to be here.
Really happy to have you as well. Well, one of the first questions I began with, just to kind of get things started, and just kind of assess where your mental and spiritual energy level is. And what I mean by that question is a number from 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where would you say you fit in that spectrum?
Right now, I would say I'm about an 8 or a 9.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for indulging me with that. And as we begin with our first question, and I'm curious to hear, what do you feel as, or what do you see as your purpose in life?
Well, that's really interesting. I'm a strong believer in the concept that the purpose in life is whatever purpose you give it. And I think your purpose changes throughout your life, but I think really the important purpose is to leave the world in a better place for future generations. We're on this planet, and with all the things that are going on at the moment, we could become an extinct species, and I don't want to see that happen. So I want to do my little bit to make the world a better place for future generations.
Well, I can understand, definitely respect that, and agree with that as well. Another question that I like to ask individuals such as yourself, being part of this conscious capitalism movement, businesses that have a higher purpose behind what they do instead of just making money, or even talking to individuals who may not necessarily be a business, but authors as well, who have a higher purpose behind why they write their books than just making money. So I'm curious, by the definition of conscious leader, how would you yourself define a conscious leader?
Well, leadership's interesting. Some people are given leadership, for example, a leadership role in a company. Some people just take leadership because they're in a situation where a leader is needed. And some people are unconsciously leaders because people look up to them. But if you know that you're in a leadership situation, you have to take the leadership part of your job seriously. A lot of people become managers, but don't really take on the leadership role. And there's one huge part of the job of a leader. Sure, the job is to lead people, but you should also be serving the people you lead. As a leader, you're in a position to enhance the working experience and the lives generally of the people you lead. And I think it's very important to remember that you're not just leading people, you should be serving them as well. And that makes you a better leader, because if people know that you are invested in them, they will become invested in you. So it also has a non-altruistic side to it.
Absolutely. I completely concur with that. You're absolutely right. Love that perspective on it. What would you say that you're most grateful for in your life?
That's a really good question, and I've thought about that a lot. I mean, first, there's the amazing luck of having been born at all. There's so many different combinations of DNA that there could be, that I'm lucky to have been one. But I guess I'm most grateful for is my parents, and the amazing luck to have been born to loving parents in a free society where I could grow, and a society where people don't starve. I mean, that is the most amazing luck, and that's the thing that I'm most grateful for.
Excellent, excellent. Now, this question that I'm curious, as I talk to different authors, I'm always curious to know what inspired you to become an author.
Well, it's interesting. I was the chief technology officer in a small software company, and we were unable to get our next round of financing. It was at the time in 2003 when there was a big burst of the high-tech bubble. And we'd already raised $1.5 million. We developed our software, and now we needed money to do some serious marketing. We just couldn't get it. We had to close our doors. And I put everything into that. I put not just money, but my entire psyche was in that company. And so when we had to close the doors, it was devastating. But, I pulled my socks up and said, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to get a consulting role somewhere, plan my next moves. So I was on the phone calling people, as you do, and I was chatting to people and trying to see if I could find some contract work somewhere. And on this particular day, it was about 3 PM, I put the phone down, and I'd had this idea for a book in my head. So I opened up a Word document and I started writing. And 12 hours later, I'd written about 13,000 words. And it was 3 AM. I hadn't eaten dinner. I just, and I've never written as many words in one day since that day. But, but that was really what got me going. I thought, I love this. I love this because I'm able to express important ideas through the medium of fiction. That's what really got me hooked. Now that book never came to anything. I never actually finished that book, and I tried a few other books, and finally I did finish a book, but it wasn't very good. But I was lucky. I found a really wonderful editor who became my mentor, and she mentored me through the first book that was actually published. And so I've been very, very lucky in that regard. But that's how it came. It was kind of rising from the ashes of a failed business.
Well, I've learned throughout history and from my experience as well that sometimes the best changes or pivots come when things don't go well in one extent, and then something else comes from that. And
That's
you
right.
find yourself on a different path than you thought you were going on to begin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, life is full of surprises. Life is what happens when you're making other plans.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I'm curious, as I read about some of the topics about your books. What attracted you to write about a drug addicted ex-cop?
Well, it was interesting that while I was learning how to become a writer, basically, I did some consulting projects in the software business, and I was doing some consulting for a small software company, and they didn't have a lot of money, so their offices were in the poor area of town. And every day when I went into the office, I walked past this alley, and this alley was quite a scary place. It was full of drug addicts. They used it as their bedroom, their kitchen, their living room. They used it as their bathroom. And it was a pretty disgusting area. And I remember thinking, what must it be like to wake up in that alley? And I mentioned this to my editor and mentor, and she said, that's interesting. Who would wake up in an alley like that? And we talked about, it'd be fun to have a lawyer, because nobody likes lawyers. No, I love lawyers. And we thought maybe a businessman. And then we hit on the idea of it could be a cop, because there'd be some irony in that. The cop spent his whole life dealing with these people who are drug addicts. It would be ironic if he were a drug addict and waking up in that alley. And that's how the whole thing started. It was serendipitous, and if I'd have had a a contract anywhere else where I didn't have to go past that alley, I would never have thought of writing that first book.
Interesting. That's an interesting tale there. I'm curious to know that when you're writing uh, about a character such as a drug addicted ex cop, does the image of the character appear in your mind? In other words, you have a visual understanding of what this character looks like, his age, his weight, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a strong visual image of all of my characters, but I'm very careful not to write too much about what they look like visually, because I believe a reader wants the chance to build a character in their mind the way they want to see them, and that the character will become more real for them if it's a character they've built in their mind. Mm. So readers know that Cal Rogan, who is my protagonist, that he's tall. They know that he's very well built, and in the later books, they know that his hair is graying a little bit. But that's all. That's all I've actually done in describing him. Because I value my readers' ability to build the characters themselves and enjoy them in their own way.
That's an interesting point. Interesting point. What would you say was the most difficult challenge you experienced with writing your first book?
Well, I guess the challenge was getting to a book that was good enough. I read a lot, and I've always read a lot. When I was a kid, my mom was always saying, "Why is your battery out of flash? Why do I only need to put batteries in your flashlight?" Because I used to read under the covers in bed at night. And so I've always been an avid reader, and I assumed, because I'd read a lot, and I assumed I could write. Turns out, not so much. The first couple of books that I tried, I ran out of steam on. They just had become boring. The book that my fifth attempt was a book that I actually completed, and it just wasn't. I thought it was great, but it just wasn't that good. And it was only when I met Lisa, the editor that I mentioned, she was wonderful. She did a 37-page report on the book for me. And I realized that I didn't really know how to write. I had lots of good ideas and lots of plot lines, but I didn't really know how to write. So I took the craft of writing very, very seriously. I took as many courses as I could. I read as many books as I could. And I was lucky to have Lisa mentor me through the first two books. And the thing that I'm most conscious of all the time that I'm writing is there tension in what I'm writing? Is there something that makes the reader want to turn to the next page? And that's something that I'm really passionate about when I'm writing. I'll give you an example. I was writing a chapter where two characters are reviewing the crime that they're faced with. And as I was writing, I was thinking, I need to write this because I need them to point in certain directions, but it's getting a bit boring. So I had somebody run into their office with blood all over their face. And I thought, don't know quite why, but then I wrote in, I thought, why would that happen? Wrote it in, moved it, put it into the plot, because you need that tension all the time. You can't let the readers get bored with your words. And when I read the works of other authors, as I do all the time, I read a lot of crime fiction, I always kind of look to places where the tension drops and make sure that doesn't happen with my books. So sometimes I fail in my mission, but generally I'm very cognizant of that.
Those are very important tips there to be mindful of for aspiring writers out there.
Yeah, it even applies if you're writing nonfiction. Even if you're writing nonfiction, you still want to give a reader a reason to turn to the next page.
Hmm.
And but in fiction, in any genre of fiction, it's vital that you have some form of tension, whether it's an unanswered question, um, or somebody does something that's out of character and you want to know why. For whatever the reason, um, tension is everything. Tension is king.
Understood. Understood. So I get the sense that you enjoy being an author.
I do.
And
I love it. Yeah.
what do you enjoy about it the most?
You know, the thing that uh, when you're working in a job where you're working for somebody, and when I've been in that position and been in a leadership position, I always took the time to thank people for what they're doing and to praise them for what they've done. Um, but as a writer, you don't have a boss. You don't have that feedback. So I have a mailing list of about 7,000 people, and they're all readers. They've all read many of my books, and I email them all the time. Every couple of weeks, I'll send out an email to everybody, but I get so much feedback from them. If somebody has got my first book, and they often I'll get an email saying, "I love the book. This was great," and I that's what gives me enjoyment. That makes a lot of that makes it worthwhile. And I've established friendships with a lot of these readers. It's they send me jokes and things. It's more than just author-reader relationship. But so that is, for me personally, that feels good, and it keeps me going and gives me the energy to keep going. But another thing that I really like about being an author is I never want to be preachy in my books, but I want to put in elements to tell people how I feel. For example, I'm a strong, strong believer in the legalization and control of all drugs. And so I'll have people have a brief discussion in the book about that, where I present both sides of the issue. Because I would like to get into my readers' heads, because they're all citizens, they're all voters.
Right.
That we really cannot continue to have this drug situation where the drugs and their distribution are being handled by criminal gangs. We need to be in a situation where people who are addicted can get their drugs at a reasonable price. They don't need to steal to get them. That when they get a drug and it says there's X micrograms of heroin in it, they know that there's X micrograms of heroin in it, and that it's not cut with something. And we can only do that if we legalize drugs and control them. And a lot of people confuse decriminalization with legalization. Decriminalization, they've done that in the Netherlands, doesn't really work that well. It's better than before, but if you legalize and give companies control the companies that produce the drugs in the same way as you control tobacco and the same way as you control alcohol sales, and have those sort of controls, it will be hard for children, school kids, to get drugs. Right now, it's easier for a high school kid to get crack cocaine than it is to buy a six-pack of beer. Because six-pack of beer, they've either got to get an adult, or they've got to go into a liquor store with faked ID, and the liquor store may not accept that ID. For them to get crack cocaine, they know who the kids are who've got access, and they just go to the kid in school and buy it. So, but when you legalize it, there's no profit in it for the criminals anymore. you make it, as I say, you make it reasonably priced, like the cost of a cigarette. So I'm going on about this, but I try and put elements of that into my books, and also elements about homelessness, because there's a couple of characters in the book who are homeless alcoholics, but they do surveillance work for Rogan, because nobody notices the homeless guy sitting there.
Right.
And so I put in little things about homelessness as well. So and that's something that's really important to me as a reader, and one of the things as an author, something I really enjoy doing. So that was a long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
But no, I appreciate that, because I agree with you as well that definitely some things need to be done with our society and the systems we have with dealing with drug abuse and taking criminality away from drugs. I think would definitely be a refreshing change, because what's currently implemented is not working. I remember the late great comedian George Carlin once said that, it's funny how everything that we always, in the United States, that is, we put words like war in front of certain campaigns, like the war on drugs, the war on crime, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
It never goes well. But
No.
we never put things like the war to end homelessness. We never put that kind of effort. So it's funny how, to your point, having this war on drugs, all it does is just lock up more people. Drugs, I mean, prisons have exceeded capacity over the last decades beyond comprehension. And not to go down too deep down that conversation, but I definitely appreciate your perspective on that. And as you talked about how writing helps you kind of get that message out there and conveyed, I'm curious to know, how many books have you written so far in your life?
7 so far have been published. I've written a few more, but 7 have been published. I'm working on the 8th and the 9th book right now. And I'm going to keep writing until they pry my computer out of my cold, dead hands.
Excellent. That's kind of shift over to some more personal questions about you. So what one decision have you made in your life that you would say has been the most significant or most meaningful to you?
Well, I'm putting the usual things aside, like the decision to have kids, and I've got 5 kids, so and I love every one of them to bits. But I think one of the most meaningful decisions to my life as it is now was to write the book about a drug addicted ex-cop, because it put me into a situation where I had to do a lot of research, and that research completely changed my attitude about addiction, about homelessness, about even down to the level of free will. My life is completely changed because of that. It's given me a level of compassion. When I see a homeless person begging on the streets, as we have that happen, I'll almost always engage with them and say, "Hi, how are you?" And sometimes if I think they're not going to spend it on drugs or booze, I'll even give them money. But frequently, that's not a good idea. On occasion, I'll buy them food. There's one guy who quite often is begging outside Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian restaurant chain. Quite often he's begging outside there, and I bought him a meal there because he's hungry. So one of the things that people tend to do is it's probably due to an embarrassment thing, but people tend to ignore the homeless guy. They look the other way. And I think we need to engage them and realize that there are people behind them. When I was doing my research, I met a homeless guy. He was an alcoholic. And I asked him if he'd ever been to an AA meeting. He said, no. He says, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just an old drunk. He was a great guy. He became a friend. And he was one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. He'd been the head librarian at McMaster University, which is a university in the eastern part of Canada. And he spent his whole life in the library reading books. And I write in the library. That's my favorite place to write. And that's how I met him. And that guy could tell you anything about any book. You could go up to him and you could say, some time ago, I read a book about a drug dealer named Wolf. And he'd say, oh, yeah, this is the name of the book. This is the author. And he'd tell you something interesting, like, oh, did you know the author wrote that when he was in the Caribbean? Or when he was just amazing. And he was homeless and living on the streets or in shelters, or actually he spent a lot of his nights in a 24-hour McDonald's. And to their credit, the staff at McDonald's always welcomed him there and let him stay there overnight and sleep there. And I thought, which was great. Yeah. And I was, it's nice to know that people like that have, people in McDonald's. It's probably against the rules to allow people to sleep in McDonald's overnight.
Absolutely.
But the staff there, they let him, and that was good, because he hated the homeless shelters. He hated them.
Rightfully so, from what I've heard about him.
Yeah. Now, he has now passed away, unfortunately. The alcohol he got into an accident and passed away. But I miss him. He was a great guy. But there's a lot of homeless people who are not what you think. There's some of them there's some brilliant minds and people with interesting stories. And we just need to be compassionate to them. And I think that writing these books certainly changed my mind and is actually prompting me to take action. Right now we have a run for a new mayor for Vancouver. And the leader in the polls is a good friend of mine. He actually worked in the same software company that went under. He's a great guy, and I'm going to put a proposal to him to take a blighted block in the downtown east side, level it, and build a homeless shelter, a drug counseling place, an education place where people who've been on the streets can get their GEDs, and then inexpensive or free housing for people. And if we can pull that off, that will do a lot to deal with the homeless problem we have in Vancouver.
I love that idea. I'm a proponent behind giving people an opportunity to change their life, give them the resources, give them the blueprint. They have to take the action. I remember T.D. Jakes once said that he realized that his prayers wasn't the answer until he got up off his knees.
That's great. I love that.
Providing people an opportunity is what I'm an advocate for, and that's kind of what I believe in with my conscious community model. And speaking of, what I've learned in my business and what I do as a business owner is help conscious leaders to build systems to help them build connectionally intelligent tribes to make it more efficient. And really being clear on who they're connecting with and how to go about connecting with the individuals so they can really maximize their time and you're not spending a lot of time talking to folks who you're not in line with. And so
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, I have certain key characteristics that I came up with regards to what I look for in an individual. And I realized that I myself had to do a deep introspective analysis to make sure I exhibit those characteristics as well. And that was something I put on my mind. But I wanted to set that context to ask this question because in your world, as a person who obviously wants to make a difference in the world, and I believe if we're going to make a difference, it's going to take a village of us, it's going to take a tribe of us to make a difference. What characteristics do you look for when you're making connections, when someone reaches out to you, whether it's LinkedIn or a referral for someone in person? Are there certain key things you're looking for an individual to have before you either accept that connection request or you engage in that conversation or even maybe even have that in-person meeting?
Yeah, I the thing that I always look for in any sort of partnership situation is, I think there are really two things. One is I want to see that person's passion for what we're going to do, and I want them to have integrity. And by integrity, I mean, that's a wide word, covers a wide range of things. But the thing that I find very important is that if somebody says they're going to do something, they will do it.
Hmm.
But also, I want them, if they don't really want to do it, I want them to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And they don't have to give me a reason.
Hmm.
But I want them to have the strength to not take on something that I might want them to take on if they don't have a passion to take that on. So, you know, uh, people have asked me, would I read their book and comment on it? And I said, sometimes I've said yes, sometimes I've said no, but
Hmm.
that if I say yes, I'm going to do it, and I'm also going to comment honestly on it. And so, therefore, I tend to not read the books of anybody who's a close friend, just in case the book's not good. But no, I think that passion and integrity are the two things that I'm always looking for.
Okay, I understand that. Now, a part two of that question would be, and helping my clients, I always looking for, as I get data, and I'm a big data, everything data drives all my decisions. And once I understand what their goals are and what's important to them, I'm looking for how I can build them strategic relationships and identify strategic
Mhm.
partners for them. And so, with that said, who would be a great strategic partner for you?
Well, um, as a writer, I don't. It's a lonely job, but I would really be interested in talking to somebody who may have had some experience, whether successful or otherwise, in trying to convince a municipality to do something really constructive about homelessness.
Hmm.
That would be somebody that would be a great strategic partner for me, because they would know what works, what doesn't work, um, and it would be a sounding board, because I really want to try and convince the new mayor to take this project on.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I noticed that the two times you and I have talked, and judging from your energy being the eight today, are there certain morning rituals that you go through to kind of keep yourself in a positive state of mind where you're not allowing the negativity of the news and the world that comes in our lives to, I would say, control your thoughts, but keep yourself in this positive state of mind and still want to be of service and still want to provide value? Any morning rituals you go through to kind of keep that?
No, not really. I I don't. I'm not. I don't believe in free will. Um, I don't think we have a lot of control over our minds. But if I'm feeling down, I will do things like look at some of the emails that I've got from my readers, um, or open a book that inspires me. Um, but I don't really have morning rituals. I do I do mindfulness meditation, but I typically don't do that first thing in the morning. I'll do it later in the day, and that's very helpful because uh, you're scrutinizing your own mind, and you get to realize that whether you're up or whether you're down, it's not really that much different, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so no, I don't have routines to kind of keep me positive, because I think there is value in not not being in a positive state of mind all the time, because if you're in a positive state of mind all the time, you may not think about what obstacles may arise. And a study of successful leaders that I read some time ago said that leaders who are always in a positive state of mind generally have problems with their companies, because they don't take the time to look on what negatives could be happening. They're just, this is going to work. We're going to go with this. Um, so, um, so a negative state of mind has value as well, as long as you are mindful where you're at.
Interesting perspective on that. Down to my last two questions for the podcast. I'll set the context for this question because I want to make sure I explain why I come up with this term. So the question is there a kin connection you would like to meet? And what I mean by that question, I'm not necessarily referring to my name or my company's name, Kin Connections, but it's a title I put on someone who's achieved a level of success, whether it's career, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, that if you were to meet this person and actually co-create, do something together with them, you can make something grow exponentially because of their influence and their social capital, so to speak. And I'm not talking about meeting this person as a fan where the leverage, you're here and they're there. It's more you all come together and they see value in you and you see value in them. You all can sit down and have a mutual understanding of the meeting of the minds. And I've developed a process and a set of strategies for connecting with individuals like that. Like, for example, mine is Magic Johnson, the former basketball player. And it's not because he's a former basketball player. I really don't. I mean, that's impressive. I never was a Laker fan, but it's his pro work after that, his business work, his community work, his ability to build relationships and make things happen. I believe that him and I got together, we could make some powerful things happen along some of the ideals that I have. So with that being said, who would be a great kin connection for you to meet?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, and it's wide open here. I can say anyone in the world, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You know who I'd like to meet is Andrew Yang. You know, he was a Democratic presidential candidate, and he's from the tech business, and he's got a great social conscience, and he is somebody who can get stuff done. And I would love to talk to him about this idea for a solution to the homeless problem. So Yeah, Andrew Yang would be great to meet. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And then my last question would be, is there a book that you've read that you would say has been the most influential in your life, or maybe a book you read in the very last week that you felt that be a great book to recommend to someone that could have an influential impact on their lives that you want to share with our listening audience?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite book of all time is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck.
Mm.
That is a wonderful book. It's written with such compassion that it really changed my attitudes around poverty and capitalism and socialism and all of those things, and gave me a tremendous perspective. I love that book. In fact, I like anything that John Steinbeck wrote. Another great book of his is Of Mice and Men. But The Grapes of Wrath is a great book. That was an easy question.
Well, I want to thank you again, Robert, for your investment of time and energy and joining me today on the King Connections podcast. As we close things out, I want to give you an opportunity to share any closing thoughts, words of wisdom, as well as your contact information on where a listening audience who want to connect with you or maybe even purchase your books. If you were sharing that information right now, it'd be great.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, words of wisdom. Wisdom's tricky. When you think you've got some, the universe usually shows you don't. But
Absolutely.
If there's anyone watching who is an aspiring author, I would say the best thing you can do is learn the craft of writing as well as you possibly can, because that's the thing that will make your books stand out and make people want to read the next book. So that's my words of wisdom for the day. In terms of my connection information, my website, best place to start is robertpfrench.com. And anyone who goes there can get my first book for free to give it a try, take it for a test drive and see if you like my books. I'm also on Facebook at Robert P. French Author, and Twitter at Robert P. French, and LinkedIn. If you look for Robert French Author, you'll find me. So they're my places where people can connect with me. And my email address is on my website. If anyone wanted to email me, I always answer emails. So that's me. That's me.
Well, again, Robert, thank you again for your investment of time, energy, your insightful ideas. Definitely look forward to. I normally just read nonfiction mostly, but you've intrigued me with your the character that you've written, your antagonist, so to speak. You've intrigued me to want to read about him and see how he goes about conducting and living his life with those challenges from his past and how he navigates that. But thank you for that. And I want to thank our listening audience to listen to another episode of King Connections podcast. And I want to wish everyone going forth into the next episode of King Connections podcast, have a blessed and productive day. Thank you.
Thank you.